Donald Trump's using the military against its own civilians is not just a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, but it puts the military in a terrible position of, in a terrible conditions to fail, and to through their actions abuse the civil liberties of fellow Americans. Why? Because the military is not made for domestic law enforcement. The military, the National Guard that's been militarized and federalized by Donald Trump, they have a whole different skill set. They have a whole different set of training. They're not meant to train de-escalation and First Amendment expression. Okay, they're there to take that bridge, take that building, win that firefight, advance the troops. That's different. And what Hina Shamsi, who is the director of the National Security Project at the American Civil Liberties Union, what she told me in an interview you're about to watch is there is a byproduct, an unfortunate byproduct of Donald Trump's use of the military on domestic soil. Not only is it a potential crime, not only is it a violation of our constitutional order, but it is also pitting American against American in a way on both ends of the bayonet that pose a risk to our entire democracy and civil liberty. And I think you'll find her interview with me fascinating. And here's the clip.
I'd love to talk, if this is an area that you want to get into, about how the administration is trying to muddy the water where the military is concerned.
Yeah, let's do that. I think our audience would really like it. Before we get to that, for those that are just joining, I have Hina Shamsi on. She's the director of the National Security Project at the American Civil Liberties Union, who's out there at the forefront with, I don't even know, it's got to be hundreds of suits by now by the ACLU against the Trump administration, and winning. And it's important. I mean, the numbers, just some people get fatigued by this and, we're losing at the Supreme Court. But these cases that have been filed are so important. I just saw a statistic that not even talking about Bondi's directives, but of the 274 or so executive orders, 110 have been blocked. 90 are still in litigation and 74 are up and running. He's batting 27% on his executive orders. And that's all because of the work of groups like the American Civil Liberties Union to bring these lawsuits. Because we only talk about the losses at the Supreme Court. I'm not saying they're not monumental, because they're some of the most major constitutional issues that we are losing on. However, we are winning at a 90% rate in the courts, and that's where justice is done by and large. Very few cases get to the first level of appeal, and very few cases, if any, get to the United States Supreme Court. We got to win there, and he's folding. There's funds that are flying out because Donald Trump's not appealing, and he's caving in because these suits are filed in the shadow of these lawsuits. Let's turn to your issue that you wanted to brief our audience on now, Hina.
Which is what I think our listeners will hopefully intuitively understand, but it's worth saying that domestic deployment of the federal military or the federalized National Guard or National Guard like in DC is rare. Historically in this country, it's been reserved for really genuine emergencies, like the extreme situation, for example, of an actual war or an armed rebellion, or to enforce federal laws if civilian agencies and courts aren't functioning. The president is threatening this as a norm. He's carried it out in California. He's working on carrying it out in DC. And he's threatening, whether it's for immigration or now for crime, to carry it out in other cities. And I will say that they tend to be large urban blue cities with large communities of color and immigrants and populations that refuse to bend the knee. And the ways, however, in which he's trying to circumvent what I think are such really critically important parts of a democratic value and norm in this country is what troubles me incredibly at this point. So one absolute foundational norm in this country is that the military should not be policing civilians. And the expression of that norm is a law called the Posse Comitatus Act that folks will have heard about. And what that prohibits is that troops under federal authority are prohibited under criminal penalty from directly enforcing civil law against civilians. So break it down to policing civilians. Now, in California, the feds claimed that they weren't in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act because troops weren't, in essence, putting their hands on civilians. But part of the trial that has been going on in California and was going on last week had testimony come out about the National Guard, federalized National Guard, Marines, accompanying civilian agencies on immigration raids, securing perimeters, doing things that law enforcement agencies do, not what we think of the military doing. And in all of these ways, the military, whether it's in California or DC or wherever else, they are trained for their own important purposes. They are not normally trained for municipal policing, right, de-escalation techniques, or the kinds of things that we seek to hold state and local law enforcement accountable to, right? And so what worries me, what should worry us all, is obviously the harm to the communities that might result, but also the legal and ethical jeopardy that troops are being exposed to. And I don't fault National Guard troops here. They're being pulled from their own communities where they already have regular jobs or other important jobs, often focused on emergency relief, and they are being placed into situations where things are very uncertain and very out of control. For example, in DC right now, we do not know, is there one combined command, right? And is it coherent? Who do the troops listen to? What are the rules for the use of force? There are absolutely rules for DC National Guard's use of force, but are they the same for the close to or approximately 1,000 other troops coming in from other parts of the country, some of whom have never been to DC before? What kind of training would they be getting? And what are the laws that they think they should be abiding by? You are putting people in jeopardy, and you're doing it unnecessarily. You're doing it as an abuse of national security and emergency powers. And the concern is that he's going to try and do it elsewhere as well.
Yeah, and wait till we see what happens when the ACLU or other groups bring their first military brutality case, right? We often see police brutality cases, 1984 type cases, different type of civil rights cases where civil rights are being abused by law enforcement. What if that law enforcement is the federalized National Guard, who, as you just said, are not trained? That's a very good point. It's really been missed by most of the commentators. I'm so glad you brought it up. That's how we hold our law enforcement ultimately accountable if it rises to the level of a civil rights abuse. But what do you do when the Marine who doesn't know what he's doing, because he's used to doing something, as you said, he's used to doing something else as a Marine. Okay, they're storming a beach, they're taking a building, they're leaving. They're fighting their way out of a firefight. They're not, what is effectively a civil protest that Donald Trump has converted by fit of alchemy into a rebellion. And now they've got the troops to handle that. I mean, Judge Breyer, who's ably handling this case, the Posse Comitatus case that you just described, I mean, in his own writing that was ultimately not affirmed by the Ninth Circuit, he said effectively, his quote, I'm paraphrasing, throwing a mango, throwing a brick, throwing a cup of water is not a rebellion. And the problem is when it got to the Ninth Circuit, which was dominated by a Trump appointee, a I thought was a moderate, but turned out not to be so much in I think it was a Bush appointee and a new Biden appointee. They went back to that deference thing that we just started this video about, which was who are we to differ with a president declaring a rebellion? Well, that's your job. And we saw it very early on, of course, with the Alien Enemies Act, as they try to do a steamroll, as you put it, of the federal judiciary, who some were prepared and some weren't. But you see, as you said, the struggle going on in the courts, led by your organization with the federal judges, about, are you going to give robust oversight on this? Or are you going to give are you going to give preference or deference on that, or obedience on national security? Sort of, which is it? You heard, I mean, I think it's properly memorialized by Judge Breyer saying out loud at the last day of the trial, what are the limits? Are you telling me? Because the Trump administration's position in every one of these cases is, there are no limits, because you shouldn't even be reviewing any. There should be no judicial review whatsoever. I said war. I said predatory incursion. I said rebellion. Back up, back off. And the judges are like, what are you talking about? We have checks and balances in this system. You do your Article 2 thing, but I got an Article 3 thing I got to do. And Breyer's like, are you telling me there's no limits? I'm very concerned by your position, Department of Justice, that there are no limits on the use of the military on domestic soil. What did you make of that in that exchange?
Well, two thoughts on that. One is specific to the California case, which is that the Ninth Circuit is going to have another shot at this, right? Like, the Ninth Circuit's original ruling was in the context of an emergency application and to stay Judge Breyer's original order. And so they gave some deference on, but not all, right? Like, they actually rejected the government's most extreme, the Fed's most extreme argument, which is give its entire deference. And they said, we get to interpret the law, right? But then they overly differed on the facts. And so that brings in the facts. We seem to have new categories of dystopian hellscaping going on in our cities that are a surprise to the inhabitants of those cities. But I think and hope that with more time and with additional briefing and a recognition of the consequence of what they're doing and saying, one of the things that the Ninth Circuit has a chance to do is really think through that what you're talking about when you're talking about the deployment at that particular stage was in a First Amendment context on domestic soil. And when you're thinking about that, courts recognize that First Amendment values have to come into play, that part of the reason that the founders distrusted and created structures against domestic deployment of the military is because of the risks that immediately raises for people's civil liberties, individual freedoms. And then I think that is also going to have to play out in DC. And it is so worrying that governors are rushing to provide support and their own state National Guard units to essentially militarize the nation's capital.
Yeah, and to your point, to rush into sending more people into a civil rights, civil liberties, insecurity and violation. I mean, you said at the top of the video, or towards the middle of the video, you said that one of the things that concerns you the most, right? These people are not trained to do this, and there's going to be abuse of civil liberties as a result. Sending more people does not solve that problem. It makes it even worse. You know what I think our audience would love is to end the video with sort of them understanding what your day-to-day is like. what, as the director of the National Security Project for the American Civil Liberties Union, and I'm an old lawyer, so I see your conference table in the back, and I'm sure there's a brief or something back there that you're marking up. But tell our audience what you do to support maybe you're in court. Tell our audience what you do as the director of that unit and how you support the cases that the ACLU is bringing.
I have the incredible good fortune of working with brilliant, smart, dedicated colleagues, both on my own team and then across different parts of the legal organization. In this administration, a lot of our work has turned to very much of a domestic focus. So our range of issues covers this kind of thing that we're looking at and providing advice to our affiliates around the country, as well as our National Political Advocacy Department on laws, policies, people's Know Your Rights materials that we're going to be putting out. So it is a lot of legal and policy work that I get to do. And then our team looks out for abuses to challenge. We are pursuing national security and other abuse cases in a variety of different contexts. For example, we just our clients had a win in a First Amendment challenge to sanctions imposed on the ICC because they were preventing our human rights advocate clients from exercising their First Amendment rights to provide information and research to the ICC about massive human rights violations by the Taliban in Afghanistan and the Rohingya genocide. So we do that. We're also deeply involved in the AEA cases and a host of other cases and issues involving everything from challenges to watch listing, to religious questioning at the border, to challenges against state measures, often in Republican states, imposing restrictions on people of Asian American background to own land. So it is the gamut of things that are about national security violations where we think we can support our clients and the communities we work with in making a difference, in disrupting, in denying, and defending.
We are a better country. Our audience will sleep better at night knowing that Hina Shamsi is running the National Security Project at the American Civil Liberties Union. It's an organization that is near and dear to Midas Touch and to Legal AF. We follow your work. We report on it. But to bring somebody like you here to brief our audience is just a special pleasure. And I'm telling you, people will have much more confidence knowing that you're in the foxhole fighting the good fight, or as I like to say, you're a first responder running into the burning building to save democracy. And we need more people like you. I'd love to have you back on the show in the future.
You are very kind, and thank you.
Welcome back. I'm Michael Popok. You are on Legal AF. Take a minute, hit that free subscribe button. That's a way to support us here. The other way, we got an amazing Legal AF Substack. I'm doing 2 live a day on Legal AF Substack in addition to all the work we're doing on the Midas Touch Network and on Legal AF. I can be at the moment, at the market with you on Legal AF Substack in a community, pull 1, 2, 3,000 people together for a briefing. Then we've got the written work product. We got the videos. We got the ad-free versions of all of our podcasts on Legal AF Substack. And if you become a paid member, an entire host of other amazing quality assets and contributions will be unlocked as a paid member. I think it's about $8 a month, but we could really use the help to keep Legal AF and all of this type of content and all of these kind of contributors brought to you here on Legal AF YouTube channel. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.